Get things going. Okay, good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for being here today for our October continuing education event. My name is Sydney Carter. I'm the Ready Program Manager at NBHP, and I do the CEU events. So a lot of people who come to these are used to seeing me. So we're so excited to have Thompson Ivins with us today, LPC at the Council on Recovery and private practitioner, going to be speaking to us today about vocational meaning as a path to mental wellness. So very new and exciting topic that I'm looking forward to hearing more about, and I hope y'all are looking forward to it as well and hearing how you can help your clients with this topic. In terms of CEU information, we'll have 1 hour of CEU available to select providers as usual. I'll put all the providers in the chat, but we have about 8 different provider groups who are eligible. And so to be eligible, you need to join by 12:15, stay for the duration, and take the survey that will be placed in the chat at the end of the meeting within about 2 weeks or so. I think the survey is going to be due on October 31st. So again, I'll put all this information in the chat, but thank you for being here. If you'd like to introduce yourselves in the chat, please feel free to, and please stay on mute unless the presenter asks you all to come off mute. And if you have questions, please put them in the chat and I will make sure we address them. So without further ado, I will pass things off to our presenter, and thank you all and enjoy.
Awesome. Thank you, Sydney. Hey, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Thompson Ivins, that we see here. And when Sydney had approached me, we had talked about some potential ideas, and one of the ones we threw out was vocational meaning as a path to mental wellness. So as we get going today, let me just click this over here. I want to just tell you really the objective today. It's just to leave this CEU, this training, with a deeper understanding of what some literature says, what's kind of going on out in the field. And also, really, this is one person's experience working with a lot of clients with this vocational meaning and fulfillment kind of struggle that we're feeling in my practice. Also, we're going to go through a real case study of a client I'm working with, so you can kind of see the tools and techniques that I use when I start to hear this thing of like, I can't do this anymore. Oh my gosh, what am I doing for a living? Really, and I will tell you, as somebody who understands this, and I'll share this in just a second, really one of the biggest key messages I have to say is the importance of vocational meaning and mental health, how intertwined they are. And then I do think all of us are going to experience some form of existential crisis at some point in our careers to say, what the heck am I doing? What am I doing with my life? So I think you don't have to be well-versed in existentialism. You don't have to be a Frankl disciple, but I think it helps to start exploring some of those. And I'll show you kind of how I do that. But moving into this really quickly background. So I graduated from the University of Texas in 1999 with a degree in finance. Never once did I think about my career. I thought if I just basically follow the rules, get your business degree, make good money, and off you go. That was kind of my plan. And for me, right around 28, 29 years of age, I had started my career with PricewaterhouseCoopers. I kind of thought, oh no, I'm not sure I like this. And oh no, even worse was this crisis of, I don't know who I want to be when I grow up. And that was a massive, massive struggle for me. And it lasted for about 6 or 7 years. So I am one of those people that we would call a midlife career changer, because when I was 39 years old, I made this change, kind of walking about what really fills my cup. And it was my own personal kind of exploring, reading every book under the sun. What's your parachute? What's your color? What's your number? What's your sign? All this good stuff. And lots of interviews to actually understand what I'm interested in. So I wanted to share that with you guys, to say a lot of this was kind of my own self-discovery. Finished my master's degree. After that, did 1 year of my PhD in psychology at Florida State University, and I specifically chose them because of an assessment that they use there that not a lot of people know about, that I want to share with you guys today. So that's me in a nutshell. Here we go. So by the numbers, I always think it's fun to first look at some numbers, and let me actually bring this up on my side real quick. What I think is really interesting about this is the least stressed Americans feel in their life is at 72 years of age. That is when stress is at its lowest. So we think about that, that is a lifetime of school and a lifetime of career. And it's not until we are 72 that we tend to say, hey, I'm not that stressed anymore. I'm not as stressed. Let's just say that. The second thing I want to point out is 48% of Americans do not sleep through the night due to stress, right? And we just know we call it this umbrella term stress. Oops. Okay. So even more interesting, and I will tell you this, I love the Gallup State of the American Workforce. If you're sitting at your desk right now, I highly encourage you, just Google it at some point, take a look at it. It's the Gallup State of the American Workforce. Nothing really great about it, except I always love to see these statistics that they have, right? This people thriving, people struggling, people doing well, and all that other good stuff. And this is what we're seeing right now with the Google workforce, or I'm sorry, Gallup workforce. 33% of people say that they are striving. I don't know about you guys. That number seems a little high to me. Not just because what I do for a living, I would just say in general, from spending 22 years in corporate America, I did not work with 33% of my coworkers, my supervisors, and everybody else who really felt they were thriving. But what does that mean? Positive views of their present life situation and of the next 5 years. What we do see a lot more of is this. And this is coming from the latest one. 52% feel overwhelmed. 57% feel disconnected or lonely. 43% feel they are struggling. And 4% feel they are suffering. This is our workforce that we're seeing. What is the financial impact? Harvard did a wonderful study several years ago, and it's $282 billion. This is what this workforce stress is costing the US economy. How they came up with this number was essentially missed days, days sick, days of the medical bills due to stress, the overtime work that other people have to carry because of that, the burnout, the fatigue, the anxiety. Added it all up, we come to about $282 billion due to workplace related stress. Okay. I still think, um, I feel like we all tend to conflate stress with anxiety, right? So when we say workplace stress, we're talking about this mental exhaustion, feeling stressed for various reasons. I always say if I can point to it, I know it. That's my stress right there. In my opinion, that is where we kind of find in that Gallup workplace saying, I'm feeling overwhelmed. There's so much work on my plate. There's so much I have to do. That's that I feel overwhelmed, 52%. It's this other side that I really think we take anxiety and we put it underneath stress, and that's what we're talking about. And in many cases, and specifically what we're talking about today, is this last bullet I have here. It's this incongruency between, is this what I signed up for? And is this what I'm experiencing? And that is that career vocational misalignment, right? That is where I think 43% are feeling this thing of struggling, suffering, disconnected. Even just right there, thinking of that word, struggling and suffering and being disconnected. That just itself kind of is just such doom and gloom, and something I experience a lot with the people that I work with in my practice. Specifically, when we're talking vocation, this is where I tend to explore. This is what I tend to hear when clients come in and they tell me their umbrella term, feeling stressed from work-related issues. Usually I'm hearing it in these three big areas, right? Lack of strong relationships, meaning I don't get on with my boss, right? I don't get on with my peers, or I've got a troublesome employee. Future connectedness, that again comes into that real vocational meaningness. Why am I doing this? If I'm going to do something 60 hours a week, why am I doing this? A lot of panic comes up when we actually start to ask ourselves, just what the heck am I doing with my life? And then comes into this other part, which is self-doubt. It's too late to make a change. I'm not good enough to make a change. It'll take me too long to retool myself and reskill myself and all this. I don't even know what the next step is. And that constitutes this thing of just, what is my next step? I don't know. Now, I'm not going to get into it. I also work with the Council on Recovery because when we start to have this, we know we all have maladaptive ways of handling our stress and our anxiety. So a lot of the times what I'll see it coupled up with is, I've been drinking a little too much too. My partner tells me I'm drinking too much. My partner tells me this or that. So they're getting that feedback from the people around them. But again, that's where I see it. And I'll just say, this just popped in my brain. For 3 years of my corporate experience, I was involved in this thing called Vistage International, an awesome kind of small club that you got to be a part of, and you worked with other small and medium-sized business vice presidents and CEOs in their group. And the number one issue that people always had with their work beyond career related identification was always people related. And I want to put that out there because when we talk about vocational meaning or we talk about vocational dissatisfaction, I think there's an opportunity there for us to make sure we're exploring, is it the job, is it the people, or is it this anxiety, this incongruence between what I'm doing and who I want to be, and what mark do I want to leave, what legacy do I want to have in my career. So when I was thinking about putting this together, I have loads and loads of information. I've had the opportunity to talk about this with a specific assessment and other places. I thought, let's actually take this through a case study of somebody that I'm working with right now. And here is the case study. This is a 33-year-old Indian male, full-time employed college graduate, currently applying for his MBA, currently engaged. His initial presenting concern why he came in was, I'm feeling stressed, but it's seasonal stress. He worked in a career where things would go up and down depending on the month of the year. But his fiance, who he adored, who he loved, he was excited about getting married to, kept suggesting to him, please go talk to somebody about this stress that you're feeling, right? So just wanted to add in some additional factors. Strong family ties, loved his father, loved his mother, loved his brother, loves his sister. I mean, he's all intents and purposes, and he would say this, I should be happy. We hear that phrase a lot. I should be happy, right? Very successful coworkers in his family, right? And I see it all there, right? All right, I'm going to come into this thing called therapy. I don't know what I'm supposed to get out of it. I think there's some job related stuff. That's just kind of the tinge of how it walked into my office. So the therapeutic approach, the first thing I want to tell you about is my background when looking at these things. We all know this, all of us as clinicians learn their story. We all have a story, right? And the way I tend to frame things up and conceptualize people is with an Adlerian background. And focusing on when we talk CBT and a lot of motivational interviewing, but I actually want to hear the answers to I am, people are, the world is, and what we all give up to survive in our households of origin. Then, when we're talking career, and we'll get there, is existentialism. I want to know at some point how we deal with our own terms, with death, aloneness, meaninglessness, and choice. Right. So this is where I'm exploring it. And this is where we're going to kind of take this case and where these techniques kind of come into. Right. Now, when I was at Florida State University, one of the things in the early stages was this thing called job demand control support model. They would teach this. I don't know about you guys, but you would take that class in your master's on career related counseling. People always kind of rolled their eyes. They're like, ugh, I don't want to be a career counselor. I don't want to do any of that stuff. Right. I want to work on the mental health. But it kind of looks like this. Right here it is. Where are people that struggle? They're the people in they'll show you high strain or in these high job demands with low job decision, low job control. And I remember the first time I saw this, I was 40 years old, and I thought, yeah, well, there's a lot of unhappy people with low job demands and high job decision. There's a lot of people that are very unhappy right over here with low job demands and low job control. There's a lot of people that are unhappy around here. And I said, how do you, and I was thinking of my own story, how do you explain for that person? How do we actually make count of this person that says, hey, I actually have a good boss, or I actually make good money, or this, and that. I just don't really like the work that I'm doing, right? That was always bubbling up for me. And in all the literature, all those wonderful career theories and career related models, they never really accounted for this thing that said, I don't know what I want to do. Or I know what I want to do. It's too late. Whatever that reason is, that vocational, more existential why we exist. So the first thing I would say whenever we talk to somebody, I think when we're looking at this and when I was looking at this client, I would call it a vocational belief audit because most of our conversations were simply, I should be happy, right? And I think it's important for all of us because we all are in our own careers is to first understand some counseling implications, right? Anytime we're going to think about, I don't think this is the career for me, we have to, I think there's an opportunity to start looking at, okay, there is going to be existential angst within us because probably what's lying on the surface is some wrestling with what is this life for? What is my work for? What am I doing? And I do think, yeah, we're going to challenge irrational beliefs. We're going to challenge these distortions, but we have to understand also what is the purpose of this? I know it's that easy philosophical question, what is the meaning of life? We have to be willing to explore that with them and ask those questions. I think it's our role, no matter what it ever is we're challenging, but specifically if they're coming with work, to actually help them think about what career actually means, right? What is this thing called vocation? Just want to say that. First thing I would do in belief audit. I think it's important to first place, and you're almost going to see some of that stuff with Glasser and Woulding when we're talking about choice theory and we're looking at reality needs. It fits very nicely in here when I start to explore this. And I'm going to look at things like around workplace security. And really, do you feel safe in your job? Do you feel that they're actually covering you from a financial perspective? I just pulled these numbers last week. I found it very interesting, everything going on right now with the economy and everything going on with our government right now. Job insecurity from a government perspective, insecurity sky high. Private sector also high, 39%, right? Again, there's that 30% of Americans feeling very happy with their salary. 55 believe they are undercompensated. I have to laugh at that. I've never met somebody who didn't think they were slightly undercompensated at some point. So for all of us, hopefully we're meeting that, right? But there's this other thing right here. If I'm not making enough to fill the bills, if my security and safety is threatened from the job that I'm having, I'm probably not thinking so much along the lines around existential concepts around meaning and purpose, right? Maybe I am, but it's actually looking at that. So I just wanted to pull that out there though, because I want to know about the people when I'm looking at this belief audit. And I think about this through the lens of if you made another $50,000, would that constitute this more nebulous term of would that give you job satisfaction? You will probably hear things along the lines like, well, of course, yes. And then I think if you sit with that long enough, if we're talking about vocational meaning and fulfillment, you're probably going to get some pushback internally where somebody starts to come back and say, no, I don't think that, I still think that anxiety would be there. But it's to explore those questions with them first around their salary and the safety of their job, right? And I mean, we go back to some of those early models when you're just looking, if my security or safety is threatened, I'm not thinking of anything else, right? Where we're coming into. Sense of belonging. I mentioned this earlier. This is going to be a place where we might conflate vocational meaning with just the workplace that we're actually working. Monster just released by the way, Monster still exists. I don't go to Monster too much. I was kind of shocked to see this, but it came in one of my feeds. But they say 80% of workers now work in what they would call a toxic work environment. I don't know if anybody's had the chance to read Generations by Michelle Twain. I highly recommend that book, by the way. The book Generations is absolutely wonderful. It's just how we view from the silent generation all the way up to Gen Z, just how we view it. I want to explore this if I hear that somebody's working in a toxic workplace, because I want to know what it means to work in a toxic workplace. It's another one of those words that's kind of entered our zeitgeist of what toxicity is, but understanding specifically around those relationships, because that's what we mean when we say toxic workplace. What is my relationship with my superior and with my peers and maybe my supervisees, right? A lot of our workplace stress, most of it is going to be around the people we work with, right? So I want to just make sure that we're also exploring that. Again, I'm prepping all this up till we get to vocational meaning. But looking at this thing of like, where does the conflict arise? Is there coaching opportunities there? Is there something of understanding what it feels like when we're in conflict, how we actually handle the conflict? What is the conflict about? Looking at it, is it just the work was done? Is it the work hours put upon us? Maybe we find them unreasonable. Maybe somebody's working us too much, but is it toxic? How do we work with that? Not saying it's not toxic, but to understand and define what this toxic workplace is that we're working in. I think that's important to look at because generationally, we see some very different ideas of what that is, what that actually means. So just again, the first place I want to look at is security and safety. The second place I want to look at is the relationships that they have at work. 3, 4, I put these together, recognition and autonomy. I'm exploring this when somebody's talking about their career because I want to know, are you being recognized? Right? Do you have autonomy in your job and are you being recognized? Now that autonomy sits very nice in that JCDS model that I showed you up earlier. Very nice. How much autonomy, how much freedom do I have to actually execute the job that I want to do? How much freedom do I have? And am I getting recognized? And I don't mean financially compensated. What I mean is, do I have some kind of perks that I get? Do I get to have a more flexible work schedule? Do I get the opportunity for promotion and career development? Do I get raises? Do I have, you can work from home on Fridays. Hey, you don't have to clock out here. You're doing a good job, all that other good stuff. I want to look at that too, because somebody might think, this career I'm in stinks. But is it the job, or is it that person's mix with the career that they're choosing to be a part of? Sometimes a change of landscape is a good thing, but I want to actually kind of understand that as we start to do this belief audit of why is this career not feeling right to me, right? Then we get into something I think is fundamentally important, and that is where we're starting to move now into this vocational meaning, this vocational fulfillment. And that's where something is missing. All those conversations, if I made more money, I'd be happy. If I could have Fridays off or work remotely or whatever that thing is, it's if something is still missing there, what is missing? Joy. Do I actually, and when I say joy, a passion, this thing that we know said, I wake up and I look forward to work. Don't get me wrong, we all enjoy a nice vacation, but do I look forward to work? Do I look forward to it? Do I enjoy the work I'm doing? And I'm glad, and am I glad of the work that I am doing? I look forward as like a three-part thing. Do I look forward to it? Do I enjoy it? Am I glad I'm doing it? If I can hit all three of those, I'm probably not in there talking about vocational meaning and fulfillment, right? But when it's you start looking at this, and this is a very experiential thing when somebody thinks about their work, we start to go, I know I have a career path, the money's good, everything else seems good, then why am I not happy? I can't tell you how many times in the last 9 years I have heard that phrase. I'm just not happy. Right. And so what I did was I took the case that we were talking about, the 33-year-old male, and everything in bold is something directly that he has said to me. Right. So here are the words we're starting to see, which was really clicking off in my brain saying we are talking vocational meaning here. Right. Some of the other quotes, by the way, are things I hear from some of my other clients. I wanted to add those. And then I wanted to be this. I can't tell you, and I'm sure we've all heard that phrase, I just want to be happy. Right? I hear that constantly. But particularly, I can't do this to my family anymore. Right? I want to share the second bullet, or I guess it'd be the fourth bullet that's in bold. For one point in my life, it's very familiar with a thing called the Sunday night blues. This gentleman in particular had said, I don't even have the Sunday night blues. I have the Saturday late afternoon blues. There was massive panic he was dealing with, right? About this is my job. I've done everything right. Is this what I'm doing with my career? It's that thing that he was bringing into our office. And I would say it constituted this feeling of being trapped, right? We're looking at somebody who's now kind of past that first decade of career working. He's in there because a lot of other thoughts are coming out of there. I'm too late to change. That, why are you getting your MBA? It's the next logical step. Do you want to get your MBA? I don't want to get my MBA. Why am I applying to it? Because it's the next right thing to do. So we start challenging these beliefs on what we're actually trying to do, right? And then you have the question of what is it that you do want to do? And that's a real scary thing because it's like, I don't know what that is, right? And when we start to get into there, we are talking vocational meaning. We are talking about somebody who puts a strong identity into this work he does because he identifies it with himself. Again, simple questions. Snoopy says it best here, right? Where am I going? What am I doing? What is the meaning of life? These are simple questions. We all have answers to them, right? Subjectively, maybe some of us do. But I think about this because any type of career change, really a vocation change, we're not talking job change at this point. It is we're going to make a change here in this. It is a massive boundary decision. I think anytime we come across these portions in our life where we're going to make a change, it is an existential change. We're going to start pursuing this thing called I've got life, I've got death coming up on me. What am I doing with this thing? I think looking in and understanding what the role vocation has to do for our lives, right? I've only found one really good career assessment because it goes beyond skills at some point, right? I think of the traditional career counseling, what our career was like born in a lot was that career assessment, which is, hey, you're really good at math, you should do something with numbers. Okay, I might be good at math, but I don't like math. I'm not that terribly interested in it, right? So getting into that, I think that's where I started to develop something that I'm going to share with you guys. And it was after this. So at Florida State, you can Google this. I actually want you to take a look at it. It's called the Vocational Meaning and Fulfillment Survey. It's right here. I know it's very small. I apologize for the screen being small here. And I'll share some of those questions with you and all that. So if you can see this, you should be able to Google this under Gary Peterson. Unfortunately, he got very sick before he published this. This is something I worked on him with him in 2020, was putting this together. But it was actually looking at this thing in a very reality needs kind of way. We're looking at it from basic needs. We're looking at it from self-enhancement. We're looking at it from team. So we're looking at those things that we were just talking about there. But included in this is that vocational meaning perspective aspect of transcendence. My life has purpose. The work I have has purpose. And the work I want to do, I want to have purpose. I want to do something of purpose and greater good. And that this right here. And so just looking at this, by the way, when you get a chance to Google it, hopefully you'll be able to pull it down. I checked it. It is out there. Over here on the left, over here is how important the work in general you will do provides. You'll notice the same questions. Over here is how much your current job does it. Right? So you're just kind of comparing, this is my ideal state, this is my current state. The client we're talking about, you will actually see a little bit of a different here in basic needs, right? So what he was being fulfilled, it was all about finance. He wanted a little bit more money, but he was like, the money I'm making is good. You'll see here. But when you get to transcendence, when you get to his response there, the contrast between what he craved, what he desired in his life versus what he was getting in his current job was 26 versus 8. And when we charted this up, you will start to see, he kind of would tell you, I kind of knew this. And every client I've done this with, I've probably delivered this about 40 times. They will go, I kind of knew it, but it's really a lot to take in when you actually stare at this on a little graph and it just shows there's your gap. And it's this big thing called transcendence, right? It's this existential thing, this purpose, this meaning tied behind my career. So we've had a lot of fun with this one, and we're going to kind of walk through it right now. So one of the things, again, outside of the therapy, it starts to come into, okay, well, now we've pinpointed this thing. What is my first step? I don't know if anybody here, I'm sure people are here, when we started our company, that was always the first question we kind of had, right? I always think those first 22 years of life or whatever, 18 years of life are kind of mapped out for us. You're going to go to school and you're going to graduate high school. You're kind of on autopilot. The default mode network is kicked in, first 18 years, off you go. For some of us, maybe the next step was going to be college or something along those lines, or was work and go to college. But you're not really thinking about, who am I as this person in the workforce? So very, very basic. What I tend to do is have what's called an envisioning session. Um, full openness here. I tend to see about 85% of my clients are males. So I just want to share that. So when I'm getting that perspective when we're talking about vocational meaning, but I want to move their eyes off of me in general. I just share that. I whiteboard when we're doing an envisioning session and when we're doing this other technique I'll bring up for you. I want their eyes off of me and I want them up on the whiteboard, right? And essentially, miracle question. That in itself, by the way, I'm not going to get into it, but if you go back to what Berg and Kim were talking about right there, was a lot more experiential, how we set them up for this miracle question, right? It's just not king for a day. What job would you have? So I would encourage all of you to really look at this thing that says, if you went into work and you had this thing that you were excited about, and you were excited Sunday night about what you were doing, and on Friday you felt the relief of a wonderful good work, and you're really taking that into them, what kind of work are you doing? And I tell them any answer is good. I don't care if you use the term happy. That's fine. We'll define that later. I don't care what we're going to talk about there. It's, I'm doing this. I know that I'm working with people in some capacity. I know that I'm working with a product, but it's a product I don't care what it is. Just put it out there. Start to let the words come out of you, right? Because the next thing I do is I always draw a line and I said, I am curious what is going to stop us from getting to these goals. Very basic solution focused here, by the way. Very basic, but I want your eyes up there because I want to know what's going to stop us from getting there. That'll come back around in just a second. right? But again, I want to see our words up on screen, right? I want to move their eyes, get them off me. Then this, by the way, you might recognize some of these stages if you know TTM. It's also the basic model to evaluating any opportunity and strategic alternative of what we're going to take here. But I just usually, when we know there's something going on, we're sitting in that second stage too, which is really looking at what are my alternatives, right? We always have one alternative, which is to do nothing, right? But now we're actually starting to develop what are the other alternatives that might actually come into play, right? So I call it launch, and we're just looking into the future. For me, it's a 5-year plan. If client says I want to go 3 years, I say 3 years is fine. If they want to go 5 years, I say 5 years is fine. I tend to not do 10. That's a little too far, but I want to move you out with enough distance. And I want to know holistically if in 5 years from now, things were going in the right direction, what are you accomplishing right now? All right. So I put my stuff in there just so you could see. So when I started this thing 11 years ago, I knew 5 years ago, because I did this for myself, I knew, okay, I'm going to be running a private practice. I'm going to be conducting 2 blank workshops a year. I was kind of just fiddling around with it. I was letting the dreams actually happen. But I put it 5 years out, and I did that for a reason, because it was enough distance and time for me that I could start to think freely. And then comes, in my opinion, one of the big magics of this is backwards scheduling this thing. Not getting lost in the dream, but I want to actually build an actionable work plan on where I want to go with this. So I'm going to move from 5 years to 3 years. By the way, you're seeing a very pretty, or at least prettier version than we would actually conduct in session and all that. You're seeing it in a PowerPoint and all that good stuff. But we're moving it from 5 to 3, right, to 1. And each bullet corresponds with the bullet after it. I'm just moving it backwards here. That's it, right? So running a private practice with 3 employees, running a private practice, my sole source of income is the goal in 3 years. 1 year was part-time private practice. That's it, right? And there's more to it. I didn't want to put all my information up there. But a lot of the times, and I've talked to some young practitioners, they get out there and they're like, I don't even know what I'm going to do. I don't know how I'm going to do this. Where are they? And I'm like thinking, you haven't even contacted an attorney yet or a CPA to talk about the basic business structure of how to set up your PLLC. Right. But I wouldn't start them there, because then it's like, now what? If we're getting there, I want to move everybody back to say, I've got some actionable work steps of what I need to do. That's it. That's all we need to do. I want to take this anxiety and move it to stress. Essentially, when I say stress, I mean the good stress. Oh, so I do have an actionable work plan I'm working with there. Right. And we're tying it all together there. This is an example. I did my very best to make sure that there is nothing in there calling out my client. This is his work. So if you kind of see, and you'll see, he kept putting happy in there. So, and I'm not going to share his other work because we've done quite a bit of work on what happiness means, right? But when we first did this, he kept saying happy, happily married. And we were like, well, what does it mean to be happily married, right? And if you notice, this is actually more holistic. It wasn't just vocation, because I wanted him thinking about this person that he's trying to be. Vocation is a part of him. Vocation was a major part of him, but it was coming down to this thing. So it kept saying, what is happy, right? And he said, I don't know how much we're saving. So if I did this career, there's a lot of work going into this, right? And this thing actually gets far more detailed, but I'm just giving you an example. But I've done about 50 of these at this point over the last decade. So they all tend to go to that, and I'll come back to this in just a second. But this is kind of what it would look like. And again, this is through Q4. So he's putting up where we were in that year was this is what my next 90 days is going to look like. Why do I like this part here? Number one, I want to reduce the anxiety and the beating up, that internal beating up of I'm not where I wanted to be. Well, we know that. That's good information, right? Where do you want to be? Because if I get caught up in that and I'm just beating myself up, I'm struggling immensely. I can't get past that. I just want to know, okay, we're not where we need to be. Where do we need to be? It starts to separate and say, well, if I do get started now, I'm actually exactly where I'm supposed to be right now, which is really in building any project, which is evaluating the opportunity, right? What is the opportunity? That's where the real work starts to come in. That's where the vision comes in of what I'm trying to accomplish. The second big thing is this: 90% of the time that I ask somebody, when were you happy? I'm just curious, when did you actually feel happy? Right? And I have my own opinions on happiness. I won't share them today, but they'll go, I was in school and I was moving towards this thing. Right. And why we find that interesting is because it actually aligns with our neuroscience. We know dopamine is higher when we're approaching our goal than than we are when we actually have the goal. Right. And again, this is a very philosophical conversation because what we're getting at is you're putting off your happiness until you attain this thing. And then you're going to find out that when you attain this thing, you're no happier than you were, probably less than on your way towards that thing. Right. So it goes into this thing that says we have to have goals, but the goals are not the things that are going to drive this thing, this mythical thing called happiness. Right. Happiness is an output. But I tend to look at that to say this is why we work towards goals. Because usually what I've found is that it's not happiness we're chasing, it's motivation and peace. Those tend to be the things that we're chasing. I want to feel motivated and I want to be at peace that I'm on the right path. Over and over and over again, I see this especially when it comes to vocational meaning and purpose, right? Part of that, by the way, I'm oversimplifying. I just added that last one. But again, I tend to see I want to be motivated and I want to have peace that I'm on the path that I'm moving on. And then we'll add in some gratitude along the way. Right? So that was the first L of this thing called launch. Then I want to look at someone and I want to also notice some people will say, I can't believe it, but if I make a career change, I've thrown away a decade of work. Whoa, 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 is all I have to say. You have acquired some serious talent and skills in those 10 years, right? Now we have to actually start accounting for these things that are strengths, right? We need to start looking at this thing and this skill set you've developed is probably going to be applicable somewhere. We've all learned something from the job. So when working in vocational meaning, we are not throwing away this past life that we had. There are some things in there that add some massive strengths to whatever field it is we're going to choose. So what I tend to do is this is more conversational. I just put this into a PowerPoint, but I want to understand your strengths and I want to understand the liabilities you have. If anybody's ever done business, it's a SWOT analysis. I want to know where you're living, where you want to live, because those are our opportunities. Those might be our threats to where we're living and all this other good stuff. But I want to know our strengths and I want to know our challenges. Why? Because I want to capitalize on my strengths. I want to know what I can do to mitigate any of the liabilities I might have. Right. So just something thinking about there. Very, very big here, moving this along, is you understanding our stakeholders. When we get into this process, so doggone important to find the people and values that are important to you when making any change. Why are they important? How can they help in this change? One of the things that we see over and over again, especially in vocational literature or any literature, is the importance of mentors, which my wife always says. She's like, then where's my mentor? She's an attorney and she's always like, I want a mentor. How do I find a mentor? Right? It's one of the things that we all want if we're lucky when we have a mentor. I will say our field is very kind about mentorship, but not all fields are. Right. So maybe part of finding mentors is a part of our plan, by the way, in the next 90 days is to establish a relationship when we start to explore these fields and all that other good stuff. But finding this out, what about this change? If you're familiar with MI, this is very MI, very, very MI. Who can help and benefit and impact by the change that I'm about to make? I always like to add this, you, right? Again, these are therapeutic sessions. These take some time, but I want to know why you're important to you. I want to know what values are important to you and why this vocation is so important to you or this thing that you want to make a change to. I want to know how you're going to be impacted by the change because they're going to tell you how they're impacted. I can't lose this money. I've got a mortgage. I've got all this stuff. All of that is real. None of it is to be poo-pooed. It is absolutely real. We've got to assess those risks, right? Those are real when somebody is going through this. I share this with everyone just because of the fascinatingness. The reason I say 5, I have not found any literature on mentorship on 5, but I have, if you study the Gottmans, we know it's 5 bids of appreciation for every 1 perceived criticism. That is what healthy relationships do. What we also know in depression research is the way we talk to ourselves. People in a non-depressed state tend to talk in a 5-to-1 ratio to themselves. right? So when we're stuck in that vocational choice, we tend to be hard on ourselves. I've screwed up. I've waited too long, yada, 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 all that stuff that we go through. And by the way, I'm also speaking from a personal perspective because I know I postponed my vocational change for about 6 years, talking ourselves into this change, right? But one thing I found about five and this power of five was in adolescent male research. And what we found in adolescent male research is when they have five adults in their life beyond their parents who take an active interest in their life, they tend to feel connected to their schools. So for some reason, I want to share that with everyone because what it really says to me from three disparate pieces of research is that for every one negative, it weighs about five positives. So when we're working with them, I want to know who your support system is. And I want to know if we've only got three, how do we find some more, right? How do we build this thing out? One of the big ahas of the last decade of my life is that importance, that 5-to-1. Again, Gottman, depression research, and then adolescent boys, we're finding that criticism is very heavy compared to out of boys, out of girls. The next thing I want to do, nobody does this better than the insurance industry. But our stress, specifically our anxieties, I would say shifting it over, right? We as therapists, we want to move people away from the anxiety and actually have them embrace this anxiety. This thing called fear has wonderful value and information in it. It's not just coping with it, it's talking to it, it's shaking hands, it's understanding what is going on there. No industry does it better than insurance. But when I look at those, I actually want to, well, that's why I started. If you go back to the a couple slides earlier when we just did the envisioning session, I want to know what the barriers are because those must be mitigated. We've got to actually talk about, do we have a plan for those things? Because if we're looking at it from an insurance perspective, we're saying we're going to avoid it, which is what a lot of us do when we have fears, but we don't want to. We want to address them. We can't transfer them in many cases. Maybe we can, but how do we mitigate them and accept them ultimately and move forward if that's where we want to go? So I tend to think about that a lot. Let's get them down on paper so that we can work with them. Let's not let them own us, right? So keep moving forward on this. I tend to say, okay, we built this 5-year shaping plan, which really led us to that 90-day plan. I really want to now get into what are we doing in the next 3 months? I got to have something that's actionable to take with me, right? So that is just what's my 90-day plan. What am I going to do in between these sessions so that I start to do the work? Again, this is around vocational meaning. And stage one is evaluating the opportunity. If we need 2 years, it takes 2 years for phase one. This is our life. These are the types of questions we want to know, though, when we're dealing existentially with vocational meaning is, it's something that's going to continue to pop up until we start to actually address this thing. So we want to encourage those conversations around that. I just lost something I was going to say, actually. Anyway, it'll come back to me. Encouragement. All right. Big, big, big lesson that I have learned through tons of MI and doing MI training courses is to be so careful of this. This is one of those things that everybody on this call has probably felt this. We've all probably accidentally done this, maybe not in session, at least to our significant others or maybe our kids or whatever, but the unsolicited advice that we give, that purposeful, and we mean it, joyful enthusiasm and encouragement that we're going to get a pushback from. So whenever I'm doing this, the reason I'm actually moving up to a whiteboard and sitting back is because this is a very intimate, I think, personal process of figuring out just who the heck my work is going to be for me. So the encouragement might come a little later, but not in those beginning stages. Because if I start solving your problem for you, I'm giving you unsolicited advice, and unsolicited advice is the junk mail of life, right? And we want to stay away from that thing and just sit back and let them sit in it, right? So much of this stuff, we've got this 55 minutes with them in session, but that week to week is where we're stewing on this thing, right? So I want to come back to this because this is something I've learned that I'll share with you guys when I build out a 5-year plan. I'm just going back real quick. Whoops. Sorry, y'all. This is never a finished product. I will just tell you that right now. In many ways, every client I've done this with does this. They tend to say, this was awesome. This is awesome. I know where my 90-day plan is. And then it sits on their shelf somewhere on their hard drive for months. And then they will come back to me and they will say, hey, I really want to revisit that 5-year plan now. This to me is just kind of this gestating thing of just it sits in us that says, okay, it's this belief that I can actually make a change. But there's a lot of internal battle and dialogue going on within them. And I've noticed usually it's about 6 to 8 weeks before they come back and say, okay, now I'd actually like to talk about that thing we talked about a couple months ago. I really want to look at this thing, right? Because it's amazing just what happens with space and distance. They put this out and they go, I really want to do this now. And they go, yeah, I'm going to work on it. Is that cool if we talk about it next session? I'm going to actually work on it. And they will come back with a much more detailed, much more pinpointed, much more accurate. That has been the case in every single person that I've done this with. But it's never the first one. It's not like this solves it and they're like, we got our plan, we're ready to roll, and all this other good stuff. This is actually just an incredibly existential process where they're just sitting in it. And you kind of think, because it's happened so many times at this point, I now know this is just an early draft, just like any project, just like any endeavor we take on. It takes a while for it to seep into our bones, right? And it's almost like we avoid it. We've now put it out there, but what they come back with is always different than what we started with. But it's always organically theirs, and I always think that is just very, very cool to share it with you guys. Go back to where we were. So I share that encouragement always just because what I found out is whenever somebody is sitting with any of us, we all know this, and it's just a reminder to myself every time I talk about it, as much as to my fellow therapists. It's we know success works when we're working with a partner. When we have a counselor who is empathetic and listening to us and kind of just playing that guide, allowing them to have their ideas and their thoughts, that success can be up to 100%. It's when we don't feel connected to the person that's where we can actually do more damage than simply saying, hey, here's a 5-year plan, fill it out, come back to me when you're done. You know, you actually would have more success with that than if you actually just were that they didn't feel that you were getting them. So that's always a reminder to us, which is why I, who love this stuff, have to remind myself to sit on my hands so often to just say that is their process. This is their time. This is their process. I'm just a character in their game at this point, letting them figure this thing out. Um, I do believe this. I mean, we talk about it so much. It's okay to share your story if asked. They might say, how did you arrive at this? Right? I have a list of questions I could send you guys, by the way, too, of questions to generate some existential um, exploration into the client. But share your story, because what they're doing there is they're actually leading into you as one of their 5 people. And from a therapeutic sense, if we say, yes, I too had this. I mean, we're judicious in how we share, but I think there's an opportunity, especially if any of us made a change. It's kind of how did you go about it? Or at least I was scared to death. Because the one thing we're trying to do is destroy this thing of terminal uniqueness. The more we can normalize it, the feelings that it is scary as hell to know that you're about to make a change and to know that you're not alone in this thing, we actually start to get a little bit of movement there, right? And I work a lot with people in recovery. So a lot of that thing that we've learned from is just when, we share when it's appropriate, but we are one of their 5 people, hopefully, in their journey. All right. Final thoughts. Thank you guys for letting me share today, is what I will say. I'm a little biased when it comes to vocational meaning. This was something that was a big, big, big deal for me. When I tell you that I would go to the Barnes and Nobles at West Gray and Shepherd every single Saturday for hours on end, reading every self-help book on the planet, vocational self-help book, and I would do every single assessment. None of them simply were about sit with yourself. What is it that you really, really want to do? What is it that you actually find joy in? Right? Because I was caught up, and I'm just saying, and I'm just sharing this with you guys, I was caught up with the thoughts of, oh, but then I won't make money, and that means I might have to move if I can't have my house anymore. And all of those things are real, right? So that you're massively coming to terms with what you actually value. You're coming to terms with, well, how do you want to live this life? Who are you living this life for? And all that other good stuff. I was very, very lucky to have mentors in my life that kind of came at the right time to kind of steer me that way. But yeah, all I tried to do was show you guys just one set of techniques. And like I said, it's called launch. We look at the future, we account for our strengths and our challenges and our liabilities. We understand who the stakeholders are in our life, and those stakeholders who they need to be. We address the anxiety, the fears, the uncertainties that we've got to deal with. And then we chart what I would call a 90-day course on how we kind of move forward in this thing. Because just shifting it, just getting that rock under the heel, as a mentor of mine used to say, that makes us stop for a second and say, I got to take my shoe off to keep going, right? And get the rock out. That's just part of our process. And this is just one framework I have found that has been very helpful, at least in guiding our thoughts. Again, what you saw was a PowerPoint presentation of it. It is much messier in session, right? We are whiteboarding and we are talking, and usually sometimes we're stewing over a fear or wherever that is, but it's an opportunity to be a part of their journey. So with that, I'll stop, and I want to open the floor up to questions, thoughts, anything that you want to share, and I'd love to hear
Thank you so much. Are there any questions from folks? You can feel free to come off of mute or add it in the chat.
it. Sure. Yes. The term terminal uniqueness. Yeah. So I will share more openly with you. I am sober. And one of the things that we heard in that thing was around terminal uniqueness. And terminal uniqueness is this idea that we are beautifully, wonderfully made, and no one on earth will have the exact same steps or the experiences that you will ever have, but people have felt the way you have felt. And when we can get into a group and share that, oh, I'm not the only one who feels this way, it removes that terminal uniqueness, that feeling of I'm totally alone, nobody gets it. It removes shame. It creates some kind of bonding when we hear another person's story. So that's the importance of, I think, of just hearing somebody else has gone through the same thing. Oh, you've done the same thing. Or, this person that I might idolize that is amazing and wonderful and seems like they have all their stuff together. When I hear their story, I said, oh my God, there's no way. So that is what we mean by terminal uniqueness. We want to battle that, right? No one is going to ever have your life and your experiences, but they will at some point in their life probably have felt the way you felt right now. Any resources on 5 to 1? Yes, look at Gottman, look at the upward spiral for the depression research. It's a very heavy neuroscience. And I believe her number is like 4.17, by the way, but I round up because anything greater than 4 is 5, right? And I would have to find you the research. We did that at St. Thomas High School. We did a big study at St. Thomas High School, which then we've implemented at St. Thomas, that we actually implemented at Episcopal High School too, was the importance of having 5. And we just saw 5 mentors or 5 adults. That could be anyone on staff. And it became this big push to simply say, pay attention. That could also be tough love, by the way, because we probably also have our own stories of a teacher who we thought was kind of tough on us, but they paid attention to us. It just means paying attention to this person, right? I saw your work. Your work was okay. You've written better than that. Do a better job. That might sound odd. It's not just all love. It's that tough love too that simply says, you're important enough that I notice you. But yeah, that's the 5 to 1. So Gottman, upward spiral, and then I will find the research on the study of adolescent males. Let me see. Is there anything else? Great. Any other questions? I'll stick around. I mean, I don't know. That's up to you, Sydney, but I'm happy to.
Oh, yes, no. Any other questions, please feel free to let us know now in the next 5 minutes. I also just put in the CEU information again. And first of all, thank you, Thompson, so much. It was a fabulous presentation. I learned a lot, and I hope that others did as well. There are some thank yous in the chat, so that's great. And we again have 1 hour of CEU credit available for LMFTs, LPCs, licensed psychologists, licensed social workers, LCDCs, peer support specialists, and CHWs. And then you needed to stay for the whole meeting to be eligible and have joined by 12:15. I just put the CEU survey in the chat, so please take that by the deadline, which is October 31st, so next Friday, and I will distribute the CEUs within 1 month. Thank you for your patience. And again, NBHP members attend and receive CEUs for free. Non-members pay a small administrative fee. And you can see if you are an NBHP member organization with the link I included, and there is a link to pay for CEUs if you need to do that as well. Again, I put the CEU survey link in the chat. And yes, thank you all so much for being here. We'll stay on for a couple more minutes. If there are any questions or thoughts, please don't be shy. And thank you all so much for being here. And thank you, Thompson. This was great.
Yeah, thank you guys.
And we will send out the recording to the attendees. So you all will
Yeah.
have the recording.
Diana, that was the N in launch. It's basically the anxiety work. It's notating risks, right? It's all those internal thoughts that we have. So it's actually just getting those down and going understanding what those risks are. So it's notating the risks is what it is. I had to fit something in that was the N I could find was notate, by the way. It had to fit the acronym. Darn acronyms. Let's see. Okay. Okay.
Yes, Brian, your CEU is free. The Harris Center is a member with MBHP. So all good. Just do the survey and I will send it to you. Yep.
Thank you, Diana.
I'll end the recording now, but if there are any questions, please continue to put them in the chat. I'll just say the UHD one real quick. University of Houston is not a NBHP member. So if you go to that link, you're able to pay the $10 for 1 hour of CEU credit. Thank you. And then there was a question.
Dean, I was trained by Dr. Watts at Sam Houston State. He used to be the president of the Adlerian Society. So that's where he was a hard pusher for Adlerian, by the way. So as far as certified, no, not at all. But it was the last 5 years just basically working under Dr. Watts before he passed, unfortunately. I love it too, by the way. Alfred's one of my favorite people. Just his biography is wonderful, by the way, if you can find it. There's quite a few written about him, but he was a character. He was awesome. If you get a chance, see why he was so different from Freud. It was wonderful in those early days. Really, really great. There's really great, good I don't know what I would say. Almost like yeah, I'm trying to think of the right way to say it. There was definitely a battle at some point between the two, but Adler took the high road. Unfortunately, Freud did not.